Look upon me and despair. I have a camera now, and you will see me in my hillbilly glory. My ankle popped and it hurt. I don't know if you heard it, but it hurt. Anyway, the next sentence was supposed to be a joke. I was going to flex and say I need to hit some iron, and that was going to segue into what we're talking about. Anyway, we're talking about Ferrus Manus, the Gorgon. Flesh is weak, but deeds are eternal. My ankle really hurts now. We're going to be discussing an interaction between Ferrus Manus and Fulgrim, the Phoenician. These two brothers were the closest out of the Primarch, with maybe pre-heresy Perturabo and Magnus coming in as a nearby second. These two seek perfection in different ways, but definitely they were trying to become the ultimate beings. Probably the best way to explain it is in gym terms. Fulgrim seek perfection in the way of aesthetic bodybuilding, while Ferrus Manus seek the way of perfection in strongman competitions. It was pretty much looks versus functionality. Both seek to attain the perfection of the Emperor of Mankind, who they both consider to be the ultimate being, a being made of light, knowledge, and eternal prowess. Fulgrim's path was more of everyone seeing his accomplishments, while Ferrus Manus was pretty much let the deeds speak for themselves. This desire, albeit in different ways, is what brought the two together. Sharing in moments of glory, conquest, and strategy, these two were bonded. Well, up until Fulgrim picked up a fucky-wucky blade and sliced off Ferrus Manus' head during the Isfam drop site massacre. Not good. As we know, Fulgrim has a passenger princess in his head, that being the Demon Blade Lair. During this battle, the demon completely took over Fulgrim's body, and then proceeded to decapitate the Lord of Iron. Wait, no, it's Perturabo. The Lord of the Iron Hands is what I meant to say. This demon temporarily took over Fulgrim's body and completely decapitated the Lord of the Iron Hands. Still, without his head, Ferrus Manus' story would continue, but this time I want to look at a specific interaction between the two, which is the story of the two brothers playing a game of regicide. To keep it simple, regicide is like circular space chess. As usual, Fulgrim is the first to talk, asking Ferrus Manus, is he the Emperor piece or the Tetrarch? Now, of course, we know this sneaky little shit is up to something, but we don't know what quite yet. As far as we're concerned, he's merely trying to distract Ferrus Manus from the game of regicide. Ferrus, of course, isn't having any of it, and repeats the phrase, "It's your turn, brother," constantly. It's at this moment we know as a reader that something is up. Using some context clues, we notice a few things. For one, there are shapes in the dark, but Ferrus Manus doesn't quite see them, as usually the brothers play in complete darkness except for like one spotlight looking down at the regicide table. And of course he's with his favorite brothers, so this is really just a relaxing contest of strategy between the two. We also see something else. Fulgrim is staring at Ferrus Manus' hands. One of the defining qualities of Ferrus Manus is his hands. They're made out of an intense metal called necrodermis. But a weird phrase says these don't quite look like the smooth overlaying metal, but instead like armored gloves. Even Ferrus notices this detail, but after another question is asked by Fulgrim, he just completely overlooks it. The gray dead eyes of the Gorgon examines the game board, while Fulgrim strategizes his own plan and continues to ask his damn questions. Their relationship is briefly examined through like jokes and inferences as the game continues, which is really cool to see. Usually with Fulgrim being the stuck-up asshole that he is, he makes jabs and jokes at Ferrus' expense. Ferrus, of course, reaffirms their relationship and makes smaller jests back with him. Although he doesn't roast his ass like Jagatai Khan does. Oh, that line is perfection in every way. But seeing Ferrus Manus being a little lighthearted, it's not something that we get to get a peek at every day. It's really kind of sweet, too bad he's dead. But seeing Ferrus Manus jest with Fulgrim, it's not something we get to see on a day-to-day basis of the Master of the 10th Legion. However, this starts to take a darker turn as Fulgrim starts to ask Ferrus questions about the Emperor and the sanctity of the Emperor, saying if he was a tyrant, which, that's bullshit, bro. Fulgrim starts to ask different hypothetical questions about laws and that the Emperor isn't above him. But we as the reader know that this is some pre-heresy heresy. As this is happening, Ferrus Manus puts his full strategy into effect, moving one of his tetrarchs to take over another piece and effectively upgrading that into a primarch piece. If you play checkers, it's like a king me. After upgrading one of his pieces, he smugly announces his victory. Not very smugly, it's more like a slight smirk for Ferrus Manus. Fulgrim outplays Ferrus Manus in this moment. He uses a sneaky dirty bastard move called the Traitor's Gambit, and that's when the lines start to connect. Ferrus is downright livid at this point, and his brain, like I said before, connects the lines, the hypothetical questions, the particular move of the Traitor's Gambit, and him not really being able to see anything in the room but his alarm bells going off. See, as I said before, this was some pre-heresy heresy, but Ferrus Manus realizes that it's heresy. Ferrus flips the table out of the way and calls Fulgrim what he is, a traitor. But Ferrus doesn't actually realize what Fulgrim is. All of a sudden, Fulgrim transforms into this massive demon primarch, his true form with the 4 arms and probably 8 titties and like the long snake tail and really slimy appears before Ferrus Manus, making him look like a dwarf in comparison. Ferrus Manus explains that he's a vegan at a barbecue party. I didn't say that with enough accent. Ferrus Manus explains that he's... No, that's stupid. I'm not going to put that in there. I'm going to put it in there because it lengthens the time. That's really... I'm stalling right now. I'm stalling. Now, at this current moment, Ferrus Manus, the usually stone-faced stoic, the guy who's listening to all the Roman emperors of old, is shocked. He doesn't know what's going on right now. Fulgrim sees his opportunity and strikes like a viper, wrapping his jaws around the carotid artery of Ferrus Manus and tearing parts of his throat out. The carotid artery is severed and blood is gushing everywhere. But Ferrus doesn't give a shit. He wraps his hands around the jaws of Fulgrim and starts prying them open. Can you imagine the strength of this Primarch, who literally sees a demon Primarch and is like, nah, not today, here's Ferrus. It doesn't go well for him. I'm just going to let you know that now. It doesn't end well. After ripping Fulgrim off of Ferrus, Ferrus then throws Fulgrim across the room and into the dark, and Fulgrim ascends to his full height once again. Ferrus is struggling to comprehend what is going on at this moment. He's fighting like a Primarch should, but he notices that his hands aren't his own. His hammer, Forgebreaker, isn't with him. And worst of all, he starts to remember the past. The past being the Isfahan drop site massacre, where Fulgrim cut his head off. See, this is simply a clone, and we figure that out when Fulgrim starts gloating. Fulgrim briefly taunts the clone, and this clone is just shocked. I mean, he's defeated at this point. Fulgrim doesn't waste any time, however, and slams his tail through the warplate that Ferrus Manus was wearing and into his hearts, effectively killing the Lord of the Iron Hands, Master of the 10th Legion, the Gorgon, again. As Ferrus Manus' body clumps to the ground, Fulgrim starts raging in the room, screaming imperfect, 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 at what seems to be like another figure in the room. That's when the lights brighten and the room itself is filled with dozens upon dozens of dead Ferrus Manuses, all clones, of course. We see the fugly mad scientist himself appear in the room. Well, not actually in the room with Fulgrim. Fabius Bile would probably be ripped to shreds if he failed Fulgrim in person. Fulgrim starts to lament about how this Ferrus Manus clone didn't even look like him, which, really, the only difference, the tiny microscopic difference, was his hands. Everything else was perfect about Ferrus Manus. Fabius Bile begins to start making excuses, talking about how he has impure samples, and we learn that the samples that Fabius Bile is talking about was the blood from the Lair Blade during the Isfahan drop site massacre. That's when Fulgrim's passenger princess starts to taunt and mock him again. See, that princess is still up in his head. I don't know why that accent just came out, but it did. See, Fulgrim is really distraught that he's not able to bring a perfect clone of Ferrus Manus back to him. We can kind of see now that Fulgrim never wanted to kill Ferrus Manus, which we learn that in different lore because the demon took over his head and, like I said, cut off his head. But unfortunately, this clone ain't a bitch. Dozens upon dozens of times this experiment has been conducted, and every single time, the Lord of the Iron Hands, I keep saying it, but he's a stud, never turned traitor. As the two are arguing, Fabius Bile and Fulgrim starts to say that he desperately needs to talk to his brother, and he desperately needs to help Ferrus understand the situation of what happened. Of course, we know Fulgrim never wanted to kill Ferrus Manus. Instead, he wanted to turn him traitor. And that ain't happening. See, dozens and dozens of these experiments have been going on for however long while they were on this ship. And each time, subtle micro-adjustments have been made. And each time, the clone of Ferrus Manus never turned traitor. No matter how they changed this experiment, the Lord of the Iron Hands was always a loyal son of the Emperor. It's really a true testament to the Iron Hands themselves. Now, I couldn't find a sequel or a follow-up lore for this interaction, but it was really interesting getting to see Ferrus and Fulgrim talking and what Fulgrim wants to do. He wants to see Ferrus again so bad. He wants to see that perfect version of his favorite brother once again. Now, as we know, Fulgrim wants a lot of things. You know, he's probably making a lot of weird things too. Like jizzy titties. It was in the script, I'm not explaining more on it. But probably the thing that Fulgrim wants the most is to be able to apologize to his brother, to bring him back into his arms, and once again ride out into the galaxy, taking over everything and conquering. But Fulgrim's a traitor, and with the loyal son of the Emperor Ferrus Manus, he's not gonna sign up for the Slaneshi 9 pleasure realms. That's just not his thing. He probably takes a bicycle and kicks himself in the nuts as he goes through a marathon. Now, as the book comes to a close, we see Fulgrim and Fabius begin to argue a little bit more, and that's when Fulgrim says, bring in another one. And soon we see Fulgrim reset the table, reset the room, and out of the floor, a sitting Ferrus Manus clone in war plate and everything comes up, and the game begins again. Like I said before, in each experiment, small micro-adjustments would be made so that way they could hopefully find a path to turning Ferrus Manus traitor. And as we know, Ferrus Manus will always be defiant in the face of heresy. In the final pages of the short story, we see Fabius Bile standing over some jars and other failed experiments. Now, I don't know about you, but I have a little bit of trauma when I see a strange man standing over the jars. It gives me some heebie-jeebies. The final jar in the room has a small baby with a Chthonian birthmark on it. Now, as we know from the future, this is the first time that we see the baby Horus clone, which gets fucked up by Abaddon later on. Spoiler alert. Now, I can do a video on Horus later on, but let's just close this out. Imperfect by Nick Kime, and yes, I triple-checked the author. I didn't fuck it up like I did with my Garo video, and I apologize. As I was saying, Imperfect by Nick Kine was a really fun read, and it's a short story. You can pick it up on Black Library website, or you can get the audiobook. Personally, I'm always going to choose the audiobook because I just like listening to it more while I'm at work or something. My brain immediately wanted to start theory crafting ways for Ferrus Manus to come back, but as we know, he's resting peacefully fighting shit in the Emperor's Mind Palace. As always, thanks for watching.